Welcome back. Now we will start with lecture 3 in the module 6. In module 6, lecture 1 and 2, we have looked at behaviorism and nativism, that is generativism. We discussed some of the theoretical aspects of nativism, and let us now continue with the theories further. So, we will now talk about constructivism. Nativism, we have discussed the main points of nativism with certain examples and how they are found to be correct. In some cases, some of the experimental evidence also we have discussed. Now, we will move to constructivism. In constructivism, there is a very important departure from the standpoint of nativism. In this theory, they say the syntactic categories are not innately specified in children, but are conservatively learned based on the linguistic input a child is exposed to. So, in this theory, linguistic input is one of the most important aspect of it. So, there is nothing, there is no universal grammar, no innate grammar that the child is already endowed with. Rather, the child builds up the knowledge bottom up as in from it is a data driven kind of a structure that the child finally arrives at. So, this theory is based on the understanding that linguistic input is rather more important compared to what you might be born with. Thus, learning syntax of a language is not dependent on any innate rules, it is a matter of cognitive abilities. General cognitive abilities is what is given more importance in this theory. So, while generative approach emphasizes on the innate knowledge of language structure, constructivism on the other hand adopts a non-generative grammar approach for its core framework. Now, let us we must keep in mind that and this is true for nativism as well, though when we talk about generativist framework we talk about primarily universal grammar referring to Chomsky, but there are many versions of them. So, principles and parameters also have couple of different variations of them. There have been updating some updated versions of the theory and so on. So, it is not just one monolithic kind of a structure. Similarly, for constructivism as well, there are different grammars, different kinds of grammars that all come under the broader umbrella of constructivism. So, what are those grammars? Primarily the cognitive grammar and the construction grammar, that is what they depend on, they base which is part of the constructivism theory. So, this approach denies an innate knowledge endowment, but the ability to learn of course is innate, that is not denied. What is denied is the universal grammar, that is an innate grammatical structure that we have, that part is denied in this structure. So, how do this theory takes care of the bootstrapping and the poverty of stimulus that we have seen before? So, in this theory provides a different approach to tackling this problem, poverty of stimulus and bootstrapping, because this theory is based on linguistic input. They obviously do not believe in poverty of stimulus. Whatever input the child is getting is considered adequate in this theory. So, whatever is there, child is able to through some sort of a statistical learning, some sort of noticing the patterns over various occurrences, over various many occurrences, that is how they figure it out. So, data is not inadequate, data is adequate as far as this theory is concerned. So, poverty of stimulus does not arise, and they do so because they generalize across words that they behave in a similar way. So, they learn the syntax by taking into account the recurring pattern. So, that is where that is how the problem is taken care of. So, what is the main problem, main question in this approach? In the generativist approach, the main question was not how they learn, but what are the innate features. In this theory, the main question that they ask is how do children analyze the input. This is the important, because the idea that they do analyze the input is already given. So, how do they analyze it in order to arrive at the grammatical regularities. So, this is how they explain this. One is of course the most important, semantic distributional analysis, and then we also have our usage based model. There are a few more, but we are not getting there because again it is because of the paucity of time. So, semantic distributional analysis talks about the idea that children analyze the pattern of distribution of words in sentences and then extract the pattern that is generalizable. So, they notice they keep hearing sentences in various formats, and because through that across through the recurring pattern of sentences they extract the information about which is noun, which is verb, and how do they behave. So, this is what leads children to start combining the pivot words with open class nouns, then they create word order from this input. Right. So, they from the data they pick up through recurrence, through distributional analysis, they pick up the important words like the pivot words and the open class words, and then they start combining them, and that is how they create their first sentences. And we also have usage based model, which has many overlaps with distributional analysis and some added things as well. This model, usage based models are many actually, this is not a single model. So, but overall we will discuss only the broader aspects. So, these models are often based on construction grammar, which proposes a different learning curve. In this, language is an inventory of constructions. Each construction has a specific purpose for communication. So, depending on that the mapping happens. We will see them in slight more detail. This approach models children's knowledge of basic word order in terms of the stored hollow phrases like I am kicking it. So, basically there is I am, that is the agent, then there is an action, then followed by ing and then the it. So, simple transitive sentences reflect a language's basic word order. In English, in case of English, a basic word order will be a simple transitive sentence. So, I read book, I read a book, I eat bread, something like this. So, that is a simple SOV structure, that is something that is understood to be a fundamental building block for the sentence structure in English language. So, children need to learn the transitive construction, that is a template for any adult like transitive sentence will have this kind of a template, subject, verb, object. That is what they have to learn in order to be able to speak or in order to have the adult level syntactic knowledge. But this is not where they start at a different level. This is not hence not an early schema, they learn this schema later. So, this explains why children are not able to produce the transitive order in the initial stages, because this is what they have to approximate to, but they will arrive at it through the semantic distribution analysis and other features. But this is one way to explain as to how children make the mistakes and why do they make the mistakes, because in the initial stages they are still figuring out, they are still in the process of the semantic distribution and analysis, they are trying to figure out through the recurrent pattern the primary objects, the pivot words, the action, the open class words and so on. Data to support this prediction came through a number of different experimental paradigms. For example, this kind of experiments have been carried out in case of naturalistic utterance, in case of elicited production, as well as in case of syntactic primings. I have added some of the most influential work in this. This is one of the very important study, all of them of course. So, this is already been studied. Now, semantic distribution analysis needs a little bit more of discussion, because this is there, this is a constant part of the constructivist theory, whether it is usage based model or other models, this is considered to be one of the building blocks. So, this process is one by which children analyze the distribution of words in a sentence. Then they use this information to link words that behave in similar way and have similar kind of meaning. So, Ram reads the book, the boy does this, like this, various kinds of structures through a recurrent pattern. They will analyze this distribution through in different kinds of situations. So, as a result they will notice the similarity in behavior by similar kind of words. This will help them extract a pattern that underlies this behavior, right. So, that is the thing that we saw just now. So, the agent, action and then verb. For example, verbs occur in similar positions like I want, I like, I need and so on. They use similar inflections as well, I wanted, I liked, I needed. Based on this distribution, these verbs can be put together in the verb category. So, for them to arrive at something called a verb category, they need to go through, first they will be listening to all the inputs and then figure out similar sounding and similar behaving words, and then they will be put together in one class, one group. One of the first studies in this regard was carried out by Brain 1963. So, he was among the first to suggest that distributional pattern of learning actually happens in children. So, as per his theory, children start making sentences with pivot words and open clause words. That is what we mentioned in the very beginning. This is where it comes from. So, pivot words are some words like more, no, again, eat, etc. These are pivot words. He calls them pivot words. And open clause words, of course, we know noun, verb and adjectives. So, that is why in the very beginning that the children start with combining these two things. So, they will combine like only the one of these and one of these. So, that is how they will create, combine the two of them in a way that they have heard them to be used, that is from input. So, they have figured out these words in their head, and then depending on the kind of input they have had, they will combine them similarly. And then generalizing across patterns, across these patterns, then they can make more flexible structures over a period of time. Then we have usage based model. As per this model, the children's acquisition of syntax does not require any innate structure, rather it is based on general cognitive and social abilities. This is also an important factor. Okay. So, not only we need cognitive abilities, but also we need social abilities. Why social, we will see in a minute. So, there are 4 important skills that are part of usage based models, and we have distribution analysis. As I just said, that this is part of many of the theories within the constructivism umbrella. So, they have distribution analysis, we have already talked about this, we are not going back. Then there is analogical reasoning. This talks about comparing across different constructions and finding out the commonalities. Like the subject in the initial position is often the agent, let us say, in case of English language, not always in all languages, but let us hypothetically say this is the structure that they notice. So, by analogy their reasoning will be, if this is the position and this is how it behaves in a sentence, that then this must be the agent and this must be the subject. That is what analogical reason. And then there is a competition between input and the knowledge she has formed. So, every time she has a new input coming in, there will be a kind of a cross checking with the knowledge she has already formed, and this leads to correction in her own knowledge. So, if there was a wrong interpretation, let us say the verb will always come at a particular position in the sentence, and then the new knowledge, in face of new knowledge, she will be able to update that information. So, that is why competition is important. The last but not the least is what they call intention reading. Now, this is where the social abilities come into play. If you recall, we discussed in detail about joint attention, theory of mind, joint attention and social cognition as some important building blocks of the children's general cognitive abilities. That is what they are talking about. So, we have social abilities where you have intention reading. Intention reading is important because if you need to figure out the intention of the speaker, then you can understand things a little bit better. The structure of the sentences are bit better. For example, you have this often oft-cited sentence like glorp the gavagai. So, when that is the case and there is a, let us say, a rabbit scurrying by, there are only few possibilities that the mother is talking about. Either she is asking about to watch the white rabbit, or let us say to chase it or stop it, something like that. So, these now if the child is careful about the intention of the mother, then she will be able to get the correct mapping. This is why it is important. So, intention reading. So, these are the 4 important parts of the usage based model that we typically see. So, how does it work? The child learns phrases directly from input, and then through distribution and analysis they get to what is called a lexically specific schema. Okay, so this is the schema. Want plus drink becomes I want a drink. Over a period of time, then they build up an inventory of such schema. So, what kind of pivot word and what kind of open clause word can be connected, can be put together over a period of time, a schema emerges and eventually they build up an inventory with lots of such schemas. And as more and more schemas get linked together, the child gets to see, the child approaches adult knowledge state. As this knowledge gets built more and more, the child is less tied to the lexical items and is able to have abstract knowledge of the language structure. So, starting with the lexical items, starting with the pivot items and the open clause items, eventually she starts putting them together. That leads to creation of lexical, some sort of a lexical specific schema, and then that also gets more and more enriched through inputs again, and then that creates a inventory of schemas, and eventually she gets the idea, she gets the basic idea underlying all of this schema, which is when the abstract notion underlying all these structures is built up. That is when they can match the adult level of understanding in case of various kinds of sentence structure. And this process is called abstraction, because from here they have gone from their dependence on the lexical level is now less, and they have been able to create an abstract knowledge. That is why this process is called abstraction. That is how this structure needs to be understood. Now, so far this is we have talked about only the basic aspects of these two most important theoretical standpoints in terms of acquisition of syntax among children. Now, generativism, as I said, there are many layers to that. Even principles and parameters have also undergone some changes, some updating, so as well as many other things that we have not discussed, minimalism and various other things. Similarly, for constructivism also we have only stuck to the main ones. However, there are many other theories that we have not discussed. One of the most important omission is of course the optimality theory within the generative framework and the computation model in the constructivist tradition. These are also important models, just sort of adding them. And each of these theories have their sub theories, and there are data which have supporting and opposing data as well. But we cannot go beyond these to look at them in more detail, because we have let us move on to other aspects of learning syntax. Now, let us now focus on how children learn to constrain their productivity. We have already talked about generalizing and how generalizations are taken care of by children, what are the methods they probably apply. So, now let us look at some more of them. Overgeneralization is something we have discussed already. Children learn to create sentences following a pattern. Once they have figured out the pattern, they tend to generalize. They tend to use the same pattern everywhere. However, they in the process sometimes they create errors. We have seen some of those errors. For example, we have already discussed this sentence, I spilled the carpet with juice. Now, I painted I painted with a pen or a pencil or a brush is fine, but spilling the carpet with juice is not fine. So, but the structure is fine, this is possible with other kind of words, but not with this particular verb. However, this is a case of overgeneralization. Do not giggle me, I said her no, and so on. So, this is something that happens. This is where a paradox also is inbuilt. So, this is related with the problem of generalization. Now, you need generalization in order to get to more number of productions, more number of sentences from a basic structure that you have already created. Be it dependent on the universal grammar or be it dependent on your input and semantic distribution analysis, whichever way, you need generalization at some point to take care of your production, because you cannot have a one-to-one mapping on the input and output. You need to generalize on the basic understanding in order to create n number of sentences. So, generalization is an important part of learning. However, where do we stop? That is a problem. So, children learn through a type of generalization. For example, if they hear sentences like Ravi gloped Rahul. Now, if that is the construction, now gloped can be, various kinds of other verbs can replace that. So, this is a kind of a generalization that the child will eventually need to utilize. Children then understand that Rahul gloped Ravi is also possible. However, they also need to learn that this generalization is not possible in certain cases. So, you need generalization, but generalization gets you into some problem, into some constructions which are not possible. So, this is the paradox which is called Becker's paradox. How do we solve this problem? What is the solution? There are different types of solutions that have been proposed. There is negative evidence, then we have semantic verb clause hypothesis and the role of frequency. These are the three types of solutions that have been proposed. Let us look at negative evidence. Negative evidence is crucial for correcting false beliefs. So, negative evidence as in when somebody corrects you, somebody says that this is not correct. So, your caregiver or parents or somebody tells you that this sentence is not correct, this is not how you say. So, this is a negative evidence and then you course correct. So, this is negative evidence is used for all of us in all conditions for learning through life, not only for language, for all kinds of learning. So, when we take a wrong decision, for example, if you have a good friend, if you are lucky to have a good friend, the good friend might tell you that this is not a good reaction to the situation you are in. This is the negative evidence, correcting by others. Okay, so, this is something of an example which is also seen among children. Now, it is suggested that children may learn not to overgeneralize when they are stopped by doing so from doing so by parents. So, evidence in this regard are actually parents, there is a range. Sometimes parents overtly correct, sometimes they do not correct and sometimes they correct through different means. So, let us look at that entire spectrum. So, evidence range from not correcting at all to correcting using recasting. So, we will look at all these possibilities. So, first one is no correction of grammar as meaning is fine. When meaning is fine, sometimes children are not corrected overtly. For example, there are cases reported where the parents do not stop the child from using the wrong grammar as long as semantics is fine. So, for example, this is quoted from Brown and Hanlon 1970. So, the child name is Eve says, "Mama isn't a boy, he is a girl." So, this is the problem. So, she should have used the mama isn't the boy, she is a girl, right. So, but then the mother does not correct her, that is right, mama does not correct the wrong use of the pronoun in this case. This was in 1970, so pronouns had not become problematic yet. So, this is a case where the parents do not correct the grammar because semantics is fine, that she understands the meaning properly. So, they let them go. But then Eve says there is an animal, this is the animal farmhouse, mama, no, that is a lighthouse. So, when there is a wrong meaning, when the child gets the meaning incorrect, then the mother is correcting her that no, this is not a animal farmhouse, this is a lighthouse. So, the case number one, first type of negative evidence is when we have not correcting grammar, not correcting the production because of the semantics. Then there are also cases where they do not correct because, well, children's speech sounds sweet, sounds amusing also sometimes. So, sometimes the parents just let it be. So, and this is an example from comparatively recent study, and I don't like it. The mother, you don't like it, mother is not correcting, she is just playing along. This is also possible. Correction using recasting is yet another type. This is something like you are not overtly correcting, you are not saying that you are wrong, but you change the sentence structure, you create a correct syntax and then repeat it. So, evidence also exists where parents correct the syntax of their children by using what is known as recasting. Parents reformulate the child's utterance by using the correct form of the word. So, child says he wiped him, adult he wiped himself, child yes he wiped himself. So, this is recasting. He is using the same sentence structure, but with the correct grammar. This is called recasting. This is again from a study that was carried out by Saxton. So, these are the possibilities. Thus, negative evidence may sometimes help children correct overgeneralization, but this alone cannot account for the entirety of it. Yes, sometimes it negative evidence probably helps, but is it all or are there any other kind of possibilities? Turns out there are other possibilities, other hypotheses. So, let us look at some of them. Children and adults alike reject ungrammatical utterances, which is of made up words, even though they may have never heard them. So, if you have never heard them, then there is no possibility of negative evidence. Never used them, no, you have not used them, have not heard anybody else using them. So, there is no possibility of negative evidence. This study comes from another important study by Amrit. So, 5 and 9-year-old children and adults took part in this study. They used sentences like this: the joke chortled me. The use of a less frequent verb, they have used a verb that is very less low frequency word. Similarly, the joke tamed Lisa, use of novel verb, the meaning of which was said to be laughing in a particular way. This does not exist, right. So, this is they have created this word and then they created this sentence. Now, these sentences were rejected as ungrammatical, because both of the sentences were ungrammatical. This was also ungrammatical, because this is a case where the verb used is a less frequent verb. So, it is not a case of negative evidence, but because of the frequency factor which is probably playing its part here. So, negative evidence cannot answer all the questions. So, what do we have? How can we explain this? That is the theory of the hypothesis of semantic verb class hypothesis. This theory hinges on the restriction on which verbs can and cannot occur in certain syntactic structures. Every language has some rules beyond the primary syntactic rules of how to create sentences. There are certain verbs that cannot, even though it seems possible, but they will not be able to, we cannot use them in certain kind of scenario. For example, in English, double object dative constructions like X is transferred to Y, there are restrictions on which verbs can be used. So, I told something Ram something versus I said Ram something. So, when you are saying something to somebody, the verb to be used cannot be said, it has to be told. So, this is the restriction that we have. In English language, there are this kind of pairs of words which are possible in some cases there is no. So, saying something, I said Ram something is an ungrammatical construction. So, this knowledge needs to be understood. So, the key to stopping overgeneralization is to learn these subtle differences. These are very subtle differences. Even with moderate proficiency in English language, many people will make these mistakes, not just children. So, this needs an extra knowledge that the child needs to have in the domain of semantic verb class. The other another possible pointer or another possible variable could be the frequency. As we just saw that infrequent, if the verb is less frequent, they consider it ungrammatical. So, the frequency becomes an important predictor. So, if the verb is high frequency, then it is easy to understand when it is used ungrammatically. But if it is low frequency, meaning you have less chances of ever hearing it, then it is difficult for you to either reject it as ungrammatical. So, this example, this is again by Ambridge. So, less frequently used verbs are not so readily rejected, meaning they may be more prone to overgeneralization. So, low frequent. So, these are the examples. The clown laughed Lisa. Now, laughing is a kind of you can call it a high frequency word. So, this was not acceptable, less acceptable. The clown giggled Lisa, this was considered to be less bad, even though both of them mean the same thing, but giggling is less frequent than laughing. So, it was less bad. Similarly, the magician disappeared Bert, less acceptable. The magician vanished but less bad. So, this is how they checked whether the frequency level of the word, keeping the semantics similar, do they have an impact on the judgment on in terms of grammaticality and acceptability. Turns out it does. So, a high frequency by high frequency words will be more readily recognized when they are ungrammatical, but low frequency words will not be, because obviously that is low frequency, they do not probably know very well. So, they will be more prone to overgeneralization. Then a related idea is that of the idea of entrenchment. The more one hears a verb used, the more likely you are to consider it ungrammatical in unattested constructions. So, when it appears in a novel construction, you will be able to you will be more prone to consider it as ungrammatical, because you know it, you have this idea has been entrenched in your mind. This is called entrenchment. When something that you hear over and over again, you are more familiar with it, you will be able to catch it in a more easily as well. So, overgeneralization happens with verbs that are not yet firmly entrenched in the child's mind. Overgeneralization is possible for those verbs that are not very frequent in the child's atmosphere, and hence it has not been etched in the mind, so to say. Preemption hypothesis, this is again another idea related to the frequency effect of verbs. So, this theory ascribes a spatial role to the similarity of meaning in two construction. For example, the magician made the rabbit disappear. This is technically speaking, this is called a periphrastic causative construction, and then the magician disappeared the rabbit, which is ungrammatical, it does not work. So, this theory ascribes a spatial role to the similarity of meaning in two constructions. These are the two constructions that you have. So, disappearing in one case, magician made the rabbit disappear, this is one type of construction, the other is magician disappeared the rabbit. Now, if the child hears the first construction, which is a periphrastic causative construction, more often she will be able to preempt the use of the transitive. So, she will know that though a transitive verb also means same thing, however, it cannot be used in such a construction. So, frequency, preemption and entrenchment are three different sides of the same story. So, the same idea. So, frequency, on the basis of frequency, these ideas will be acted out. So, if you know, if you have heard them enough times, then you will be able to figure out where to use and where not to use. Thereby, you can the child can get rid of the overgeneralization problem. So, these are some of the ideas in terms of how children know how to put a stop to overgeneralization, how the productivity can be overproductivity can be tackled, overgeneralization can be tackled and channelized in the right way. So, these are some of the possibilities. So, here we complete this in this lecture. The next lecture we will take up other topics. Thank you.